Hey everyone, welcome back to Level Up, the Career Playbook. I am your host, Brian Bell, and I am thankful and grateful for everyone watching and listening wherever you are in the world today. Okay, when I first met Naz Jabbar, I knew two things instantly. She's not your average HR leader, and any company lucky enough to have her is instantly better for it. From early stage startups to innovation powerhouses like PayPal and Xerox PARC, Naz has been the steady hand during chaos, the strategist behind the people moves, and the partner every exec wishes they had. She's built HR from scratch. She's led through mergers and acquisitions. She's navigated transformation with a human first lens while always tying people and programs directly to business outcomes. And let me say this, she's not just great on paper, she's great in the office and in the room as well. Today, we're talking about what strategic HR actually looks like, the kind that influences product roadmaps, shapes culture, and drives performance. We're breaking down real-world lessons on influencing the C-suite, leading through change, and showing up as more than just support. Whether you're an HRBP, an aspiring people leader, or just someone who wants to build better teams, this episode is packed with practical insights for all of us. And if you happen to be hiring, you might want to listen a little closer. All right. Naz, it's great to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, Brian?
I am doing amazing. It's hot outside. The weekend is almost here, so super excited, but we're going to do some talking and some learning. So thank you for jumping on. I'm super happy and honored that you're here. This is called the Level Up Podcast, and it's sponsored by a company called MambaHR. And the reason why I bring that up is MambaHR is named after Kobe Bryant and the Mamba mentality, which is falling in love with the process. And so because this is a sports-related podcast, we have sports-related themes. And so as we go through this, you'll see that we'll have all of our themes will have some type of sports quirkiness to them, just so you know how we divide this up. So the first theme is the pregame. And so we're going to talk about your influences and your foundational parts of your career. Before we get into the questions, though, I do have to ask the fundamental question. Who is Naz? Tell me a little bit more about who you are so people listening and watching have an idea of why I have you on.
Yeah. So thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation. So who's Naz? So I've been around the block a little bit with HR. I think I've been in a variety of organizations, small startups, like you mentioned, and large giants as well. I have 20 plus years of HR experience, both strategy, hands-on, combination of both. And I've done some really exciting things, and we'll get into that. Definitely, there's been some really interesting career journeys that I've taken over the years. I'm in the Bay Area. I've been here for, gosh, well over 25 years and supported organizations. Majority of them has been really technology driven organizations like SaaS, software as a service organizations, hardware, software research. So yeah, it's been a great journey, and let's get into it, Brian.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. And I think for people listening or watching, especially if you're trying to break into HR, not just if you're an HRBP or you're an HR leader, but especially for the folks, because I get a lot of people that message me asking, hey, I'm looking to do a pivot into HR. So I think this episode itself is going to be major for a lot of those folks.
Yeah.
And at the end of this, I'll also be able to provide, if Naz allows me to, some contact information. So if you do want to connect with somebody that really knows how to navigate through a lot of this, Naz is going to be your person. All right.
Absolutely.
Like I said, we're going to start with the pregame.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your early career.
Yeah.
This is an interesting question because everybody does it a different way. I've met maybe one person that went to school for HR, but I'm
Okay.
curious for you, what got you into HR?
Yeah.
How? What happened?
Yeah. So I was not thinking about HR. I was not even in the mindset. So I kind of fell into it. I was doing something completely different. And I was in school, and I decided that I wanted to become more involved in, the traditional office kind of environment. And so I took on a temp job as a receptionist. And it just so happened to be in a boutique search firm. And I took on that role. Oh, I was that young, spunky, girl on the front that greets you. Hi, how's your day? How's it going? All of that, right? Always with a smile on my face. And I had a bunch of recruiters in the office. and the CEO as well. And I was her, admin as well. So fast forward a little bit, we had an office manager. We didn't really have a traditional like HR person in the office managing the day to day because it was a house full of recruiters and they were really self sufficient. They did a lot of their own HR kind of stuff, but the payroll and all the benefits and all that stuff that you think about, right? In that traditional HR kind of way. And she actually decided to leave the company, and I just said, "Hey, this is my opportunity." And I stepped right in. I took on the role that she was playing and I kind of took it a little bit further. I developed some really good relationships with the recruiters and I really asked them a bunch of questions like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? What are you doing with that? Why is this happening? And then really just realized just how much of an impact HR really has.
Uh-huh.
Right. And that got me excited and jazzed. But I also realized that I didn't want to be a recruiter. That's not for me. And I had my colleagues were like, "Oh, do this," back in the day of cold calling and all of that. And so I was doing some of that, and they were really teaching me and coaching me on some of the stuff. And I was like, "Yeah, that's great, but I want to be like the internal HR person. I want to talk about retention. I want to talk about culture. I want to talk about engagement. I want to talk about navigating business challenges and problems, right? That kind of stuff." And so I realized quickly that that's what I wanted to do. Although I think it's great and I love my recruiter colleagues that are able to really get in there and, do that salesy pitch of, "Hey, this is our organization. We're doing this and we're shifting and we're doing that." I think that's great. But it wasn't for me. And I was able to see that really early on. And so that's how I jumped into HR.
Let me reinforce what you said.
Yeah.
You were a receptionist and you were observing a lot of people in the different roles and the recruiters, and nobody came to you and said, "Hey, Nas, are you interested in a new career in HR?" You took a role that you could have just stayed at the desk and you could have kept the CEO happy, but you took the bull by the horns
Yep.
and said, "I'm going to turn this into something," correct?
That's right.
And I bring that up because every single person that has asked me, and I'm pretty sure for you as well, Naz, how do I get into HR? I'm actually mentoring somebody now, and they're at a generalist role, and they're like, "I want to be an HR business partner. Help me."
Yeah.
And I spent probably 20 minutes of the mentoring session telling him, uh, nobody's going to hand you this.
Yep.
So you need to go and be the master of your world
Take the
and show
initiative.
value. And to you, nobody handed you a, "Hey, would you like to be an HR generalist and
Mm-mm.
get in there?" You
I was a
saw an opportunity.
receptionist. I did not even realize that sitting in that job that I was already building these skills. Didn't know it until I said, "I can do it. I want to do it. And I'm going to show that I can do it." Right? So yeah, absolutely.
I want to follow up on that. What did you specifically do to show? Like, I know you asked questions to some of the recruiters. What were some of the other things? Because I think the valuable lesson here, and this is something I was just talking about in a mentoring session, is what are the ways, as somebody that has no experience in HR, what were the ways that you were able to show value? And what were the ways that like when you're early on, you don't even know all the different
Hmm.
arms and legs that HR has.
Yeah.
What did you do to inform yourself? What did you do then to also show value?
I would say don't underestimate your transferable skills. Right? I knew prioritization. I was managing calendars for multiple recruiters. Right? I already knew what the prioritization was. I sat in the chair and I said, "You know what? I'm going to take a look at how I prioritize what I've been doing, and I'm going to put that into what's going on in that office manager's chair." So I said, "You know what? She was doing this, she was doing that. I don't have to do it exactly how she was doing it, but I know how to get from A to Z because I've been watching, I've been listening, and I've been learning." So I would, if I had a question, I would tap my recruiter friends in the back shoulder and say, "Hey, I'm doing this. Does this make sense?" And they would say, "Oh yeah, do it this way. Oh, but don't forget about this." And I would go to the CEO and say, "Know that, we have this gap right now, and I've done this and I've done that." And she was like, "Oh, you did that already?" "Yes, absolutely. What else can I do to help out?" So remembering not just the opportunity for you to step in somewhere, but don't forget about what you bring to the table. Like you said, no one's going to hand it to you, but don't forget about already what you already have. You may not have that HR title. That's okay. You don't always necessarily have to in that moment.
100%. And the final piece to this is you are a receptionist. You could have been an office manager. That's not necessarily HR. But
Mhm.
I think those are the best roles, actually, fundamentally and foundationally, to start in HR, where you get to see a bit of recruiting, you get a bit to see a bit of onboarding, and you learn a lot more about HR because of the payroll and the benefits and all the things that you have to do to help administer behind the scenes. So if you're trying to break into HR, you can do it by looking for receptionist roles, by
Mhm.
looking for office manager roles, by
Mhm.
looking for EA roles, by
Mhm.
looking for recruiting coordinator roles.
Yep.
Those actually are really great roles. And you think, well, that's not HR. Don't worry. That generalist role is what gets most people that I know in the door. And so nothing against
Yeah.
receptionists, but
Coordinator, project, I mean, even project management type of roles. You know what I mean? You can quickly make that transition over because a lot of what we do, Brian, has a lot to do with project management. Yeah.
it's a lot of babysitting and managing.
Yes.
And it's not just where you start, but I don't want people to limit themselves on, I have to have an HR BP role. Like you have to work your way through that. But you have to have this general and broad experience to know how payroll feeds in with benefits, how the recruiting feeds into the onboarding, how the HR tool you're using feeds into performance reviews. You have to see all of it because there's just, it's like with anything else. There's
Yes.
pieces that you have to learn brick by brick. First of all, you took the receptionist role, turned it into something. But the second piece of this was you were hungry. You asked questions and you learned on your own. You attached yourself to people that were doing it. And I know, I think there's SHRM. I think I said I met one person that's gone to school for HR. Otherwise, it's go find the people that are doing the job and attach yourself at the hip to them
Yeah.
and learn and ask questions. And now
Ask
at
questions.
ChatGPT, you can be an expert more than the people that are doing it. So take the hunger that Naz had and work your way into it. You absolutely can do
Yeah.
that anyway.
And the other thing that I'd say to add to it, for me, it wasn't just about learning the fundamental pieces of HR, right? And the principles and all of that. It's your relationships. You're building relationships. That's a huge part of what we do,
Yes.
right? How are you building those relationships and how are you feeding those relationships? So it's not it's that too, and you're developing your influencing skills, which is huge.
And the relationship building is not just about the company that you're currently at, especially if you are younger. We have a few decades and a couple of these kids
Yeah.
coming out of high school and college, fine. But the people you are working with now, and even for us, the people that we're working with now will end up being some people that we might support 5, 10 years later, or
Yeah.
we need a connection on LinkedIn,
Yep.
or they moved up in their company and they're looking for their next late HR person. So it's not just the relationships internally, which you need to have. So people will be like, absolutely, come watch how I do this thing.
Yeah.
But you are setting yourself up for, especially people that want to be HR business partners. It is all about relationships and
Yes.
building trust. And so don't just look at the right now and not understand that the things you are doing right now absolutely will pay off 5, 10, 15, 20 years later.
Yep.
Speaking of 15, 20 years later, for you, you've been doing HR forever. What keeps you energized now? Why are you still in HR and haven't made a pivot somewhere else?
Because every day is different. I don't have one day that's the same as another day. And for me, it's all about the things we just talked about. It's about building relationships. It's about being lockstep with the business. It's about understanding what the business is doing. So it's not just HR every day. You're not speaking, eating, breathing HR every day. One of the things that I think makes you really successful as an HR person is you understand what the business is doing. How are you translating those business objectives, goals, whatever you want to call them, into what you're going to do, like from a HR strategy perspective? How is that translation happening? So, yeah, I mean, for me, it's just that knowing that I'm that left arm or the right arm, whichever way you want to go, to my business leader, right? They're going to, how I measure success, they're going to come to me and be like, hey, Nas, you got 10 minutes? Let's talk about this. I'm thinking about this. That for me is success. That's a trusted advisor.
To your point about how being a trusted advisor and really helping with strategy on the business. I think people, especially when I was younger and early in my career, it was like, I'm here just for a job. The
Yeah.
stuff that I'm doing does not connect to anything. It doesn't matter. The old higher up people, they're talking goals and OKRs and revenue and all these boring words. That doesn't matter to me. And the reason why it matters is if you actually start learning the business, because it sounds like all these terms and strategic and tactical, and everybody's using all the buzzwords. And
Yeah.
I think it turns off a lot of earlier career, younger people in their career journey. Is you hear all these buzzwords and you're not quite sure what they mean, and it just sounds boring. But to your point of now, when you're in, especially as a HR business partner or HR leader, you have your hands in so many different things. So it's not just these boring catchphrases. It's imagine you had your own business and you were trying to make it be $1 billion business.
Yeah.
What are all the ways that you can help make more money, keep more money, find more customers? That's what we do in HRs. We
Yeah.
are actually helping our people earn more money, keep more money, find more customers. So the more people on this planet can actually hear about what you're doing or what you're selling. If you think about it as you're your own CEO, I
Yeah.
think then for me, when I started kind of pivoting on how I think about how I show up to work, as if I was a CEO, how I can make more of an impact, in HR, you can literally put your hands in all of it, even if you're not the product person or the marketing person or the salesperson, but you can hire the person. You can learn about the revenue to figure out how a performance review structure or how other parts of the business and programs that you run affect every place else. You literally have the ability to be a part of all that. And so I'm happy that you say you're still energized. And I totally agree with it. I just want to connect the dots of just because we've been doing this for a long time and it becomes more fun the longer you do it, but you can have that fun early on if you actually
Yeah.
show that curiosity as well. So
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
really good
And
one.
that curiosity is huge.
Yeah.
It sets you apart.
And people want to, they get drawn to, "Oh, she's curious. She showed up with, maybe she wasn't completely right with what she was saying, but showed up with some research and really wants it." And all of us, I've had a bunch of people reach out to Mentor. We all actually do want to help the
Yeah.
generations that are coming after us. We really do want to
Absolutely.
help the people that are curious. And it doesn't even have to be, you don't have to be a 22-year-old kid for me to want to help you. If you're 65 and you're like, look, I'm looking to make a pivot, I'm curious, I watched your podcast or I did some digging here. Oh, wow, you really want to do this? How can I help? And so your career really speaks to that. If you could wave a magic wand and go back to your earlier days in your career when you first started out,
Yeah.
would you have gone to school? If you could set yourself up for a little bit more success earlier on, what would you have done differently earlier in your career to set you up a little bit better?
I don't think I would have done anything different, honestly. I don't think I would have said, "Hey, I need to go back to school and do some more," because I think as you grow and as you are, going from role to role, you're learning. We can take coursework, and don't get me wrong, I'm a true believer of education. Constantly learning, educating yourself, arming yourself with information, whether that's through conferences, whether that's through finding a coach or a mentor, whether that's through just learning things as you go. I would not have changed my journey at all. I learned so much very quickly. Sometimes you're really eating on the other side of the fire hose, whatever that that saying is. And you know what? I find that you really learn a lot when you're doing that. Not to say that it's a really good experience because it's not always, but you learn a lot. And so absolutely not would not change a thing.
For the person that is looking to break into HR or maybe pivot into HR,
Yeah.
what would you recommend for them? Like you said, you're not against education. For me, I went, this was when my first kid was born. I was going and getting my MBA, and it's helped just at least get my foot in the door. It hasn't helped me
Yeah.
land jobs, but it's helped me get my foot in the door. Would you recommend, you're the hiring manager, you're looking for your next HR person. Would you recommend somebody go get a SHRM? How can somebody position themselves? If you were hiring, what would you be looking for somebody that was newer into this world? How could they make themselves better?
So I did my undergrad in business management. I found that to be very, very important for me in my career.
Uh-huh.
I learned a lot of fundamental things. I learned a lot about business and how it works and why decisions are being made and how they're being made. So I do truly believe that doing your undergrad, graduate degree, or whatever is an important part of it. It does give you the theory behind everything, right? The
Hmm.
practical aspect we learn as we're going through our journeys in work. But I think I said this before. The other thing is, let's not forget about our transferable skills, like the project management, the highlighting conflict resolution. Like, how are you doing that? Right? You may be doing it and you may not even realize you're doing it. Maybe you're a
But what if I haven't? I think there's something to be said about you having the curiosity and having that drive. So you've been able to tie transferable skills. What if you're like, you know what? I just honestly haven't, I don't feel like I've done much. And so is it, to your point, is it going back to school for undergrad or even an associate's or a bachelor's in business? Is it the SHRM license? Yeah, you could say that I did X, Y, and Z jobs, and you can pull out different traits from there. But are there other specific things that you think that would help people get a heads up?
I think SHRM definitely helps because it sets you up with the principles of HR, right? Do I think it's a must have? No. I mean, I think it really depends on your journey. Where are you at? Okay, you're starting out in HR. It's what you said earlier. Tie yourself to people that are living the HR life that you're aspiring to be, to where you want to be. Tie yourself to those people. Pick their brains. Ask probing questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I ask a million questions. Even now, I still do. That's how I learn. Learn what works for you with how you learn. Some people learn, by going through a class or course. Some people learn by listening, instructor led sessions or
And
what.
that's part of our job is also to come up with different ways to for our people to grow and learn. Is
Yeah.
it's not just using LinkedIn Learning or it's not just
Yeah.
whatever course. So yeah,
Yeah. All of that. So
along those same lines of when I think about how I continue to grow, how I learn. I started this podcast because I'm like, I want to pick people's brains and learn specifically what they're doing. I am on ChatGPT. I am in the Lattice group. I go to a bunch of different places to try to stay up on top of it. And then there's a billion things internally that I get my information from and I learn from fellow HR people. What about you? I'm just curious, and this is just more of a selfish question. Are there other places or resources that you use that you love to stay sharp? Any platforms,
Mhm.
any websites, any tools, any people, any other podcasts?
So I do similar things that you talked about. I dropped off the map when it comes to SHRM a little bit. I haven't been tapping into that too much as of late, but I do a lot of the things you talk about. I'm a member of a lot of HR associations. I'm members like a lot of the LinkedIn groups. I tap into those, not just HR focused, AI, what's going on in
Wow.
technology today, what leaders are saying, what organizations are saying, what are they doing?
Okay, let's move on to the second segment called the Power Up. I want to spend some time talking about skill building and building momentum as you grow in your career. The first question that I selfishly ask almost every single person that comes on the podcast, how do you structure your day? And I want to be more specific to you though. How do you structure your day as a senior HR leader? Because like we just talked about, there's the SHRM, the websites, the tools, there's AI that we now have to learn about. There's the LinkedIn groups, there's the podcasts, and then you have your actual job. And if you're a senior HR leader, you probably have your hands in so many other parts of the business that are not even considered typical HR, but
Yeah.
you have to be a part of all this.
Yeah.
How are you actually structuring your day, structuring your week to make sure you stay focused? Are you doing routines or you have a rhythm? What are you doing to stay focused?
So we talked about how our days are never the same. But I think some of the things that I like to do is in the morning, I like to do a focus. So that means I'm looking at everything that I have going on in the day. So I'm looking at my strategic planning. I'm looking at reviewing data. I'm going to look at how I'm going to prepare for my meetings, my one on ones, my critical meetings with my leaders, and thinking through some of the organizational challenges I might have.
Let me ask you a question. Is that every morning? That's how you start your morning? Is it almost like a checklist? Or because you've been doing this for so long, you know what to do, but
It's almost like a knee-jerk thing for me. I might be doing this in the car on the way there to the office, if I'm going into the office that day or if I'm getting my coffee or whatever it is. I might be already thinking about it first hour or something like that, where I'm strategically blocking out that piece. And again, I may not have the luxury to do this every day in a structured way, but I'm going to be thinking about it. And this is my no interruption time where I am going through what needs to happen. And it's like, before you get into the flood of emails, the messages that are going to hit you on Slack, all of the stuff, people knocking on your door, whatever it is. So this is all in the ideal day. I'm thinking about this. So however that's going to work out, it's not just me sitting at my desk and doing it. I could be in the car. I could be grabbing coffee. I could be doing whatever it is I'm doing. But I'm thinking about this. This is the first thing that I'm going to think about in the
Do
morning.
you have a calendar block in that first hour?
Sometimes I do. Depends on what's going on in my day. Sometimes I will. Absolutely.
But somehow, some way, you make sure that you spend the very first part of it keeping
Thinking
distractions out
about my
and
day and strategizing about what's going on.
your pre-flight
Exactly. Like a
checklist.
pre-flight. Yes. And then after that, I'm going to be thinking about my engagement for the day. So, am I meeting with business leaders? Am I doing team meetings? Am I doing one on one? Am I scheduling them? Am I having impromptu discussions? That kind of thing. And this is where I'm really going to understand what's going on. This is where I'm going to get the pulse of what's going on in the organization. This is when people are going to raise their hand and say, hey, this is what's happening, la, la, la. We need to talk about this. This is what's going on. This is what's on their checklist. So this is where I'm also providing guidance and providing influence. It's also where I'm providing support. And then after that, I'm going to be looking at what's coming in. So again, your Slack messages, your flood of emails, all of the incoming stuff that's coming in, all the priorities. So I try to tend to use a system. So whether that's my calendar, whether it's shameless plug to Asana, whether it's anything else that helps me keep focused on what needs to happen. And if there's urgency, I'm going to categorize it by urgency and what I need to look at for that time.
And once again, let me just for specifics, you mentioned Asana, but if you don't have Asana, do you have like a Google checklist and you actually prioritize, or is this all a mental exercise because
No,
you
I'm
you kind of
writing
know
it
what to do?
down. No, I'm not going to remember everything. I'm absolutely writing it down. So it's either like I'll leverage my calendar, the notes in my calendar. I also like OneNote. I like that a lot where I can, put in links and calendar stuff and all of that. So I'll use technology to help me through that.
And you're absolutely putting priority 0, 1, 2, 3,
Yes,
or
yes, 100%. And then I also try to give myself some like thinking time. So maybe I block out a short period of time on my calendar where I'm just catching up on stuff. It's not meetings, it's processing information. So that's another time, and I'm thinking about how I'm synthesizing my information as well. Right. And then again, this is an ideal day, right? So, and then the next thing I like to do is step away from my computer, even if it's for 5 minutes.
huh?
I got to step away and take a break, go outside or whatever it is, right? And then the last thing I like to do is just before at the end of my day is just close my day out by recap and think about, how did my day go? How productive was I? What did I get done? What do I need to roll over to the next day? What had to go on the, next day or get deprioritized from this morning because something else became a higher priority in my day?
I have to ask because I know my last meeting comes. I'm like, I just want to get in my car and get home.
Yeah.
How long does this take? Because I don't
Five
want people to
minutes.
be just, okay, 5 minutes. It's
5 minutes.
only a couple minutes and it
Just a
sets you
couple
up for the
minutes.
next day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A couple minutes. And you know what? You can also do this in the car as you're thinking about it. And what I tend to do is I'm in the car, I might talk to my phone and be like, make a note about blah, blah, blah. Send myself an email. I mean, I use Siri for a lot of it when I'm in the car. Yeah. It's a quick it's a quick thing. I mean, I think the thing that we got to remember ultimately is flexibility, right? Being flexible with what works for you Everything, works things work differently for different people and how they prioritize. When something's going on, you got to pivot.
But the
So,
main thing is having some type of system and being deliberate on it and prioritizing it and not just winging it and just reacting to whatever comes along. I think
I
that's the
mean, yeah,
main
exactly. I mean,
takeaway.
you got to have some sort of structure in your head that works for you.
Let me dig there then. So, in your myriad of experience, you've done scaling up companies, you've done merger and acquisitions, you've done global expansions. What skill sets or what mindset has helped you adapt? So when you're talking about we have to pivot all the time, what really helps you in adapting across all the different things that are thrown your way every single
Yeah.
day?
I think what we talked about earlier, a deep curiosity is one. And then really trying to understand people, like the human psychology of it all. So you're dealing with people all the time. They're going through significant changes. Often there's fear associated with it, emotion, a need for clarity, a need for transparency, all of that. What are their underlying concerns? Ask yourself that. Ask them that. I mean, I think this is all curiosity. This is all the desire to want to know. It's all the desire to need to know why are people responding this way? What is driving that person's reaction? What's happening, right? Again, what are their concerns? And what you want to do is really understand what the business is trying to achieve. So, and how does that change? Say, if it is a change, how does that change impact different teams, different groups? So, if you're understanding the human aspect of it, I think that it's going to allow you to really anticipate how people react. It's really going to help you communicate effectively, communicate transparently, really connect with
Is that
people again.
experience of how people move, interact, how they feel, is that based off of experience or are you, once again, is this a learning course? Is
Not a learning course. I think we all have this curiosity about people, right? I mean, even if you're not in HR, if your partner or your coworker, you see that they're feeling uneasy about something, you're gonna reach over and go, "Are you okay?"
yeah.
I think it's human
I
nature.
think a lot of people
Human
don't
nature.
actually do that. I don't know if it's,
Okay.
and the reason why I'm asking this is I think now I almost feel it's almost a superpower of being able to read the room.
Yeah,
For
that's
me,
true.
that's just it.
It's true.
I'm focusing,
I would
scanning
agree
the
with
room to
you.
see. I don't know if people actually understand what reading the room is. And so that's why I'm digging to see how do you develop that or what are you doing to like what are specific cues? And the reason I'm asking specifics because I want people to be able to understand how to feel the room and help people through change and ask the questions when the questions need to be asked. But I don't think that not a ton of people actually know how to do that and or when to do that.
I think so for me, it's if Brian's fidgeting or if Brian's looking around or he's rolling his eyes or you can hear the sighs or something like that, I might maybe I don't verbally say it. Maybe I message him and say, "Are you okay? Do you need to step away? Do we can go chat and get a coffee?" You know what I mean? That kind of thing. But my point here is don't be afraid to do that. It's okay to do it. A lot of people I feel like have this fear. Oh my God, I don't want to ask. If you have a relationship, I have a relationship with Brian. He's my coworker. We say hi every morning. We chit chat. We crack jokes, whatever it is. Right. We worked on this project together. We built a rapport. I'm not gonna be afraid to tap him on the shoulder or send a message or something to say, "Everything okay? Are you good?" And maybe he says, "Yeah, I'm okay." In the moment, I'm like, "Okay," but he might in 10 minutes come back. Okay, hey, you want to take a walk? Let's go.
Or to your point, they might say nothing's wrong. I've had this where somebody's, Brian, you okay? And you have this really serious look in your face. And normally when I'm not talking, I have the stern look.
Yeah.
And I've had people message me saying, you okay? It just looks like you're super deep in thought. And that just snaps me out of, okay, well, I need to perk back up. So in any case, you having curiosity and actually acting on it and asking questions is going to help people and is going to help the organization ultimately by
It's
not
called
just being
human
quiet.
resources for a
Yeah.
reason. Let's not forget the human part of it. We are human. It's not just about all processes and initiatives and goals and all the buzzwords that we talked about before. It's human. So, yeah, we got to remember that. And it's natural to be curious for most of us. It's natural to care. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't see anything wrong with it.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be the human in the room. Let me pivot a little bit and let's talk more about you and your leadership roles and just you as a leader, especially in HR. A lot of our role, especially as an HR business partner, is to be working with senior leaders of companies,
Yeah.
helping them with planning out and you know, getting their strategy and making it come to fruition.
Yeah.
What's a leadership moment for you where you had to push back on your leader or the business?
When does that not happen to us, Brian, as
Well,
HRBPs?
well, I think once again, I think there's a kind of a couple of different groups where it's like I could speak up, but I don't know if I feel confident. And at some point, I do think when you build up the rapport with your leaders or your businesses, you do feel like you're able to speak up. But sometimes people don't because I'm just HR. It's not my place to speak up. And so I'm just curious for you,
Yeah.
how do you make the call where you say, you know what, I'm going to speak up and say something because something's going wrong?
Yeah. So if there's a discussion in a meeting or what have you, it depends for me. It depends on, like you mentioned, my comfort level with the leaders in the room if I'm going to say something in that moment. So say, but, in the moment, or I might say, have we thought about this? Have we thought about that? But I may pull one of the leaders aside and say, okay, well, let's talk about this a little bit more offline. I feel really, really strongly about this. I think we haven't thought about this entirely. So if it's like we're trying to recreate a brand new team and maybe we're not considering cultural nuances, maybe we're not considering the maturity of the team or the skill set or whatever it is. There's a number of things that maybe they haven't, maybe they've talked through it, maybe, but then maybe they haven't talked and thought about it through it with the HR lens that we bring. So I think for me, it's you can have a seat at the table, but do you have a voice? So I've learned that sometimes you got to pick and choose your battles. Depends on the culture of the company and the organization. Absolutely, 100%. But there has been times where I've sat at the table and I've heard some things, and I kind of, I don't know about that. And then I will have my offline discussions and we will have conversations and it will go deeper. And I think that's really important. And that all comes with building those relationships, having that rapport with your business. And that doesn't happen right away. I would say that would be for me when I start a role, that's the number one thing that I start doing as soon as I walk in. It's not just my curiosity because I ask a ton of questions. I need to be lockstep with the business. To me, that means having rapport with you and building a relationship quickly and understanding what your pain points are.
So you build a rapport. So one, it's just an enjoyable experience to be working with the person, but also so when it's time for you to push back on something, you have that relationship in order to do that.
Yeah, and you've built respect. My leaders respect me like I respect them because I've built a relationship and a rapport. Because I'm that counsel for them. I'm the coach to say, I get it, but let's
Yeah.
think about this.
Another thing is so you're here to be a trusted advisor, but I think a lot of what business partners do is also help navigate through change or transformation. That's a
Yeah.
lot of what we're doing. You are a ProSci certified change leader, correct?
Yes, I am.
From your experience in navigating through change,
Yep.
what do you think are some things that people usually get wrong when they're going through transformation? We've talked about that quite a bit today, and you've been doing that at a lot of companies you've been at. What are things that generally go wrong, and how and why do they go wrong?
So I think one of the things that comes to mind is lack of sponsorship from your executive leadership team. So they might announce the change, say that they're on board, but are they actively championing it? People need to see that your executive team is present and they're not just like, here's what's happening, and they step away. So communication consistently, I think, is important. And visibly participating. You don't want your CEO saying, oh, we're going to do this. And then you don't see him again. You just see emails. I mean, it's not a good feeling. It's not a good feeling. The other thing I would say is the communication piece. Sometimes there's poor communication. Sometimes there's not enough. Sometimes there's nothing at all. Maybe there's that announcement, like I said, and then you don't hear anything. Right. And I think when you're communicating a change, everybody is thinking about what's in it for me.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that comes into your head. How is this going to impact me? How's my job going to change? What's going to happen? What's going to happen with my team? You just go down the line. So not communicating that what's in it for me is often what gives the biggest heartburn for people. And you don't want the information you're sharing being a one-way street. Like that's just not a good feeling either.
I think I want to double down what you said, because I always think and I always say we have to make sure people understand the why. But to your point, it's the what's in it for me. That might actually be even more critical than the why. I mean, the why is important, but how does this affect me? And speaking to that is what really is going to help people at least not push back and resist the change as hard. If you can at least say, there's a purpose to this, here's the why, and here's what's in it for you. That's a really good
Yeah, and let's not
reminder.
forget, and we talked about this earlier, just how emotional change is.
Hmm.
Let's not forget that. Not just for the employee that's receiving the information, it's also for the leaders. The other thing I would say when you're going through change resistance, people are going to resist. Viewing resistance as a problem is a problem. It's natural for a lot of people to have resistance to change. Why? Because they may not understand what it's all about. They're having an emotional reaction to it. They want to know what's in it for them. So I think addressing and really going to the root cause of the resistance is going to be important as a leader, because it's that fear of unknown, lack of control, all the things we've talked about. And when folks are going through change and they're thinking about things, they're going to have some valuable feedback in the moment. So we should be listening. And then I think another couple things to highlight and think about as well is if you're expecting people to do new things in new ways, make sure that you're providing adequate training and support for what you're asking them to do. You can't expect people to just know and jump into something that maybe they don't have the full skill set for. And so coaching, training, ongoing support are going to be really important when you're navigating through change like that.
Hmm.
And then I think the last piece I would say is the reinforcement piece. So if you're making a change, don't just, again, like I said earlier, like the CEO, make the announcement and walk away. Don't do that. You need to be there. Be there, celebrate people's wins, celebrate successes, address the lingering issues quickly, transparently if you can. You can't always do that depending on what's happening, but be as transparent as you possibly can. People want to know that you're being real about it. And again, if you're expecting new ways of doing things, make sure the support is there. Also, the new behaviors, if you're creating a new culture, which you probably are if you're going through change and transformation, make sure that you are speaking that in your day to day.
It's the thing that we do the most, and it's not just HR or people teams that do it. I know HR business partners, a lot of what we do is to help manage through change. All of us are managing through change, but for some reason that's the one thing that we skip over. We just need to have the results and
Yeah.
don't understand why the project
Yeah.
flops or the initiative doesn't get the payoff that you wanted, the RI on it,
Yeah.
because we didn't take the time to do all the things that you're talking about are really helping people manage through the change, which
Yeah.
at this point, it is a science. We have so many resources on how to do it, but we still somehow skip through it. I don't understand it, but good
I
call.
think one of the things that I've seen is because you want it to happen in your timeline, it doesn't always work like that. Change takes time. And if you have timelines, that's great to have. But also remember that you got to be flexible because maybe your timeline's going to shift based on what's going on in
It
the business.
always
It
shifts.
always
So
shifts. Yes.
you expect that. All right, let's move on to the next segment,
Okay.
the playbook. Let's talk a little bit more and even deeper dive strategic people practices and how, as HR, how do we move the business? So one of the phrases that I know you hear all the time is HR should be in and on the business, not around it, but it should be in the business. It should be on the business, which is true. I shouldn't say it all snarky like that. But I'm curious from your perspective,
Yeah.
what does that actually mean in a day-to-day situation?
So being in and on the business, we're not just a support function. That's not just who we are. We don't work in a silo. It's not how we run business. We're an integral part of the business. We are lockstep with the business. Like I said before, we strategize for the future. That is part of our role. So in the business means having deep understanding of what the business is doing. You know what's going on every day in your business. You know what the challenges are, what the opportunities are, what's going on in your different client groups and teams, sales, engineering, whatever it is. You're going to know your metrics. You're going to know it because you're going to be tracking that. You're going to want to see what's happening. Why am I having attrition here? Why is it taking so long to fill this position? You're going to know your pain points.
Well, I got to push
You
back on that.
should. You should. You should.
I think for you, I think some of this you could maybe do in your sleep because you've seen it enough. And I think it's maybe more of a you should know your business. You should know the metrics. You should know the KPIs. And the question I have for you is, where do you go to find that out? That might seem like a silly question, but I do think it's a valid one.
Use your tools. We have tools in HR. Use our tools. If you're in a large, giant organization, I'm sure you got an HRS partner or someone that can pull some data for you. And if you don't, go into your system and pull the data. I'm sure you have Bamboo HR, Workday, whatever it is, right? You're going to have some form, or maybe you have Excel spreadsheets. I don't know. Hopefully you don't, but you're going to have some way, some fashion of being able to pull some numbers. Look at what the numbers are telling you.
All right. So speaking about the KPIs and the numbers, how do you tie what we as HR people are responsible for, the people programs, the performance reviews, the hiring, the onboarding, the major things that we're responsible for as a company, probably the largest budget item, maybe outside of maybe systems, the largest thing is headcount and the people. And so our job is to make sure we're managing how much people are getting paid and how many people are coming in and going out.
Yeah.
For the large people programs, or just in general for what we do as HR, how have you seen it work where we can show the board or the CFO the things that we do and the things that we manage actually tied to an actual business outcome that make people care about that?
Yeah. Tie it to your metrics, right? So your CFO is looking at the bottom line. He's not an HR person. He's not going to be thinking about the touchy feelies. He's not going to be thinking about all of that. He's going to be thinking about how are you reducing turnover? What is the percentage of turnover that you're reducing with what you're doing? You're attracting top talent. You're maintaining pay equity. You're controlling labor costs. How are you doing that? He's going to want to know what percentage are you doing? Like, how is your turnover reducing? Give him the percentage with what you're doing. How are you're saving an estimated of whatever dollars in recruitment strategy and onboarding costs annually. He's going to want to know that kind of stuff. He's also going to want to know, okay, your pay equity, you're reducing it. You're reducing your litigation risk by ensuring compliance and la 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 la. How are you doing that? By what? What's the percentage? Use your metrics. Stick your metrics in there so that you're speaking his language. He's going to want to know, tie your metrics to what you're doing. That is what I think he's going to want to see, he or she.
Okay, I can't believe we're already at the end of this. This has been a great conversation. So we're going to close this out. The final segment is called the 2-minute drill. Quick question, quick answer, just to see how you'd close this thing out. So, first question: what is one HR buzzword you'd gladly retire?
Human capital. Let's
I've never
elevate it.
actually heard anybody take an issue with that one, but it also sounds so gross and just.
It sounds gross. How about people strategy?
That's a
Let's
better one.
elevate it, right?
Yeah. What's one thing HR people should do this week to build business trust?
Have a genuine HR driven conversation with a business leader. You got to sit, again, going back to what I said before, lockstep with a business, right? But do it with someone that you don't support.
Yeah, that's a good one. And that's how you learn the business and be in and on the business.
Yeah.
What is
Ask
one?
about what's driving them. What are they struggling with?
Oh, building that relationship and that rapport. What's one underused superpower in strategic HR?
I think we talked a little bit about it, like the people metrics. I don't think we use metrics enough. I think there's a drive and desire. We're seeing it more and more now of that. I think the other thing is from a finance perspective, the P&L, what is that? Right? Understanding what that is, understanding the financial outcomes and the CFO lens, and we talked a little bit about that, right? Understanding some of that. As HR people, I know I'm not super great at that, but I like to connect the dots. And that's what I think you got to remember to do. And we don't always do that to a finance person like a CFO, unless, he's somebody that you support and you already have that kind of going on in your head.
What's the best career advice you've ever received?
Always be a student of the business.
Mm,
Always
okay.
learn. That's my thing. I
That's what
love
you started with, and that's what we're going to end with. Yeah, the
yes,
curiosity and the learning. Yeah.
learning.
And last question. If you could build one HR tool or platform or something that would make your life or HR's lives or the business world easier
Yeah.
or better, what would it be?
Having some sort of talent dashboard, risk, something, I don't know what to call it, but something that connects all of your information in HR in one spot. You know what I mean? Like when you think about performance, think about engagement, you think about market data, you think about, everything that we pull from ATS systems, having all of that integrated, one stop shop. It's always hard for us to integrate stuff in HR. Not everything always connects together, right? So you have all
That's
these multiple systems. We have it just in one spot. That would be great.
my last guest, the CEO of Bloomreach. When I asked him this question, his was, how do we take the HR data, because there's so much of it, and how do we actually tie our people to what the business is actually driving? This is the stuff that you and I have been
Yeah.
doing forever. And this is what we've been talking about this entire hour.
Yeah.
But how do we actually tie? This is what NAS is doing. This is how it actually affects what the company is trying to accomplish with the bottom line. And to your point, so how do we take all that data and tie it into the business so people understand what we really do and why it actually matters?
Yeah. And I think it would help us to be more proactive as well. We're looking at everything. We have access to everything. As HR folks, we don't always have access to all of it where we can find it easily.
How do we
So
tie it together?
how do we
Okay.
tie it together? Yep.
Naz, this has been amazing. I've actually learned a lot, and I'm already thinking about all the different snippets that we're going to be able to take from this, because one of the things I want to do is focus more on HR and our craft. It is an actual craft, and it is very important. But to your point, it's being curious, putting yourself in the room, even if nobody's going to place you there. And so this has been really helpful. And hopefully it's really, really been helpful for a lot of people that are either trying to pivot into HR or that are trying to grow their career. This is really an important conversation. I appreciate you giving us some of that knowledge today. So all the people that are listening, if you've been looking for a blueprint on how to drive business outcomes, I think that you need to rewind this episode and watch it and listen to it a couple more times, because today has been a masterclass. And here's something worth noting. NAS is also open to additional roles in leadership. So if you are somebody out there that's looking for the next best person that's going to help drive your people, programs, strategies, NAS is your person. So make sure you reach out to her. I can put some information into the description later so you can connect with her. You can reach out to me directly and I'll make sure to connect you to, and you can find her profile in the show notes. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Mamba HR Level Up podcast on YouTube and on Spotify. And until next time, keep leveling up. See you all later.